It's so nice to see you again, Claire, today, and thanks so much for coming along. And so, as I was just saying, that the purpose of today is now that we've had quite a few coaching supervision sessions, is to draw a line under it and use this conversation just to really reflect on how the supervision has been for you and how it's helped you with your coaching, and really see a bit about your learnings. How does that sound to you?
Yeah, sounds great. Look
Fab,
forward to
fab,
it.
fab. I mean, the obvious big picture question is like generally in the round, what's this experience of coaching supervision been like for you as a coach?
Yeah, so I think there's been lots of positives from it, but for me, the main thing has been having a space that's held for me to discuss what happens to be on my mind at the time. I think it's a real privilege to be able to have somebody who's there for you, who's asking questions, who's helping you explore things in a deeper way. So, it's very tricky to coach yourself. It can be very hard to even though self-reflection is part of our process as a coach, to pull things out when you're actually in it is quite tricky. But to have that space, and I think that's an enormous benefit of having supervision, because I might even come to a session thinking I don't have much to talk about, or I don't have a big topic, or whatever it might be. And sure enough, um, as soon as we start exploring, there's so much that comes out, and I don't really have that for
Yes.
myself. So I think that is the without a doubt the biggest positive and the biggest benefit, the biggest takeaway for me is having a space
Yes.
to be listened to and to be questioned.
Yes.
You know, so that I've really loved.
And what knowing that that space is in your diary, like I don't know, you look in your diary and you think, oh, Thursday I've got supervision coming up. Like, what does that mean for you sort of sustaining yourself through the week?
You what? Sorry, you.
What does it mean for you, like knowing that you've got supervision coming up, how helping you, knowing that
Uh,
that's in the diary.
yeah, I mean, again, it's knowing that that's my. It's almost like I don't have to work hard in this space.
Yeah.
This is not me sitting and focusing on somebody else. I'm focusing just on me, and it's not that I had to sit there and do lots of prep or I have to do lots of things afterwards. It's like, oh, that's my time
Yeah.
in the diary. It's not something that I'd ever want to move.
Yes.
It's something that almost, if anything, it's like I think it's one of the things that you don't realize how valuable something is until you've tried it.
Yeah.
So I think beforehand, having not experienced it before, I was thinking, oh, it's just like almost like well, it's a bit of a tick box, and this is one of those things one should do, and I'm sure it'll be helpful and whatever. But it goes much deeper than that, and it actually, I think it would be very difficult to find a coach who wouldn't benefit from having that space, not just to explore yourself, like to explore personally,
Yeah.
um, but the fact that it can be about your personal challenges, or it can be about something that's happened with a client, or it can be something to do with your business, or it can be something that emotionally came up for you where you've got your own thing. Like there's so many different areas
Yes.
that it can support you. The knowing that it's in my diary, even though I don't know necessarily what I'm going to talk about, is still like comforting and has a sense of ease to it, rather than a sense of, oh, there's something in my diary.
Yes.
Which
Yeah.
of course I never feel.
No, 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 no. Yes. If any clients are watching, we never feel like that. Never feel like the weight of it. Yeah. But you raise a really good point actually about the idea that it's not a tick box exercise. I mean, one of the things that I observe is for example, if you want to get on certain like applying for a tender or getting on the list of NHS registered coaches, you always have to say, yes, I have supervision. Here's the name of my supervisor and so on.
Right.
And that can be looked upon as one of two ways: tick box exercise or like an essential and nourishing part of our practice. And I think the way that
Mm.
you describe it's an essential and nourishing part of your practice, right?
Yeah, I love the word nourishing there. I think that is really represents what it feels like after you come off the supervision call.
Yes.
It's you filled your bucket a bit. Looked after yourself. You've given yourself the extra pep that you need. And I actually didn't realize that you actually had to have supervision for certain things. That's actually quite interesting to me. I think of it now more as this is something that I have to have for my world, because I believe that it makes me better and it supports me. You know, we go off to be coaches, and that's great. And obviously you learn every single time you coach. But if you're not in constant self-education, then you can even forget about techniques and things like that. And actually just being in those conversations, in the reciprocal conversations that we have, it's great in terms of personal growth, in terms of nourishment, in terms of, you know, making sure that you are continuing to build on and improve, and yes, better serve your clients, of course, but also yourself, without sounding cheesy. Like, it is, you need to look after yourself as well. Sometimes we do deal with people and situations which might be highly emotive, or tricky. Nothing's predictable, nothing's the same. You know, we don't it's not. So I think it's a fantastic outlet. And and I like the analogy I just used of the filling the bucket, especially if you feel depleted. It's kind of like, it gives you that kind of breath and that space again, which goes back to your lovely nourishment word.
And when you said that, made me think, you know, one of the words that is used to describe coaching in those three categories is restorative, and there is something about that, isn't it? You know, coaching can, you know, the impact of coaching for us as coaches, what our clients bring to us, it might just bounce off us. We might absorb it. It might be absolutely fine, but there might be just a moment of getting that nourishment, which is, to be really clear, it's not mandatory. I mean, in some places it's mandatory, you know, so there will be some organizations or networks or particular applications where you have to say, yes, I have supervision. But as a unlike therapy, as a general principle in the industry, it's not mandatory, which is why it's confusing, you know, which is why lots of coaches don't come to supervision, either because they can't find a supervisor or can't afford it or don't want to do it until they've earned equivalent or something of that nature. But I'm with you. I think it's a good, accessible way to look after yourself and look after your practice, and that's what's important.
Yeah, and remind yourself, you know, it's funny because you're asking me questions. So there's not that you're coaching me as such. I know you're supervising, but still there is that deeper questioning. There is that kind of reflective nature. There is that encouragement to think further on your points. And yes, of course, you're in it at the moment and at the time, but it also reminds me that I do that too, and I can do that with people. So I think so. What you're saying about the fact that it's not necessary, I can't remember if we said this in one of our earlier sessions, but I always thought of it in the way that, you know, other therapies might expect it, such as I believe, like psychologists, for example, like you need to have it. It's part of it. I think it's an expectation, or I don't know how it works. But and that always seemed very sensible to me. You know, that's and I like sensible, and it's almost a shame that it's not part of coaching, especially as you build on your business and you build on your experience and you kind of get into the groove a bit more. It seems like a natural progression to have that support for yourself, in terms of, you know, so that you can grow too, but you've got that outlet, you've got somebody else that you can bounce off and look up to and ask questions of and share with.
Yes, absolutely. And I agree. And I mean, luckily, whether it's mandatory or not, I think that, you know, the wise coach makes this decision that you've done. You're right. Well, that's it.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
I wanted to follow up something you said before, which was you could bring this, or you could bring, you know, can bring a client issue or worry or some sensitivity that's happened to you, or even a business thing. You know, what's that variety like? Like knowing that you've got all of those possibilities within what you want to talk about in supervision. What does that do for you?
It's very freeing, because I can actually come with anything, and also I suppose you never know where your supervision session's going to take you. You don't know quite what path you're going to end up going down. Sometimes these things obviously cross over, but I enjoy it because there are times when I have wanted to talk about a client confidentially. And explore whatever it might be. but there are also, for me, I also find some of the challenges in running your own business and growing a certain type of business, and sometimes it can be quite lonely.
Yeah.
It's not like there's an instruction manual as to how we do this, and so there is a companionship in the fact that you don't necessarily need it to talk about clients. You can talk about your own challenges in your business or whatever it might be, and that and there's the third thing. So there's like talking about the client situations, there's talking about your business, but then there's talking about you and some of your responses. And I don't want to say that one is more valuable than the other, but I suppose that's the one where you almost feel like you have an understanding ear because you're somebody who's gone through the same kind of things.
Yes.
There's nothing that's going to be shocking or unusual or unable to be dealt with or discussed. So there's no kind of paranoia or worry about what gets brought to a session, because as I said, it's quite freeing. There's an ease to it. Yes. This is not an obligation or a hardship. This is a joy and an ease and a helpfulness and a space that. Well, a space that's just for me to bring absolutely anything. I mean, you don't. When do you get that? We don't really have those things. I mean, even if you go off and speak to a friend or whatever, they don't understand where you're coming from, so they'll be very helpful or try whatever. But you can't really have those kind of conversations. So it is lovely to be speaking to somebody, to be supervised by somebody in the same industry. Yeah. With similar training. Obviously, I trained under you, anyway for one of my qualifications. But it's like we understand. There's an understanding there before we start, and that means that freely I can bring anything to the table, which is quite remarkable, really.
Well, and I mean,
I'm flattering you, aren't I? That's the thing, Charlie.
I am blushing a bit. I'm squirming a little bit. I'm coping with it as best as I can. But I mean, and I'd like to explore that a bit. I mean, I don't want to put you on a pedestal at all, but there is something in the supervision writing that we're encouraged to look out for, and that's what's known as the business as usual coach. So the coach who does come to supervision, right, but maybe as you describe, as a tick box, and it's almost like there's nothing to see here, my practice is fine, I've got nothing to worry about, yes I have supervision for whatever, but actually I'm not really digging deep. So I haven't really everyone I've supervised hasn't been like that, but I've definitely read case studies like that. So So then it makes me think, well, then as coaches, like how much are you bringing and how much do you notice any holding back? So, I mean, the way you talk and the way you've been, it sounds like you're bringing, as much as you need to. How is that experience right? Do you find that you bring most things and you're not holding back very much?
Yeah, I love a question like that. No, I don't hold back, but I wonder if that's me as a personality as well. But if I'm in what I believe is a trusting, relationship, whatever kind of relationship that might be, whether it's supervisory, whatever, friendship, whatever it is, you get me as like, this is just me. Yeah, I don't hold back. I actually find the idea of being like that a bit exhausting, a bit too much hard work, and I don't need that. So no, I don't hold back, and I feel perfectly comfortable to be myself, which is a bit of a relief, really.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's like if someone you think, oh, you have to be strategic anyway. Well, I'll tell them that, and I won't tell them that, and I'll tell them that this week, but not next week. And yeah, it can get a bit confusing. All right.
Yeah. Plus, I'll never remember. It's just at least this way, I know that I've just said exactly what I think and what I feel and what I say, and had that kind of honesty and like purity of the interaction. I can't actually imagine having to keep that in my head of what I am saying, what I am not saying. Keeping obviously client confidentiality there all the time, but it's very safe. I don't need to hide. There's no reason. I actually think that when I'm saying about that reciprocal information in relationship, sorry, it's really, I think, a very important part. I don't think I could, obviously you and I get on very well. And and that helps as well. I think it would be tricky if I didn't have that.
Yeah.
So, maybe if it was a different supervisor and that I hadn't connected with, that we don't understand each other in terms of the questions and the way, the progress that we make during the session, maybe I'd feel differently. And so I do think it is, and I think, this goes with clients as well. Like, you wouldn't, in theory, you don't want to take on a client that there isn't a connection and understanding, and that you're actually able to resonate somehow with each other, because that relationship, especially when we're doing it across the screen like this, is a really important part of it. And if you find that relationship that works, then I feel like there's no reason that I would be thinking about holding back.
Yes. Yeah. No, absolutely. And thank you. And I think that, these things are interesting for us to think about in the context of also, how our coachees are and what they're doing and whether they're holding back and what they're bringing in. Yeah, you're right. That sort of open book thing, it works well for you, doesn't it? Okay. So the last question I wanted to ask about, I suppose, thinking about how this experience has been, and then we'll ask a couple of questions about the future. Without necessarily having to think about the specific, now I ask better questions or my agenda setting is or whatever. How do you think the supervising generally has been influencing how you coach or how you manage your coaching?
In a couple of ways. I think that I think that it's an opportunity for reflection that I perhaps wouldn't do in so much detail otherwise.
Yeah.
So you kind of start to think outside the box a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's kind of what I was saying earlier about it, you can't, it's quite tricky when it's just you. So having somebody else to bounce off of or ask questions of or have feedback from, that helps me be better at what I do, I believe. So that is a lovely part of it. What was the question again? Now it's gone out of my head. You see,
just how it's influenced, generally how it's influenced your
how it's influenced my coaching. Yeah. So definitely in terms of reflection, we have had a few conversations about business as well, which is really useful. So I think that that's really helped that side of progress as well. But just the fact that it's just like a really, it feels integral now. It feels like something that needs to continue. It's like I said earlier about, you don't know what you need until you have it. Yeah. It might not have been something that I felt. I also thought, this is for much, much, much more experienced coaches. And it's, I guess I'm kind of in the medium level. I've got several years behind me, but there's people who are much more experienced than me. But it feels like this could actually be useful from the get-go, right up until whatever level of seniority you want to consider. Yeah. I just think that I feel for me that I want to always improve my coaching. This is really important to me. I want to know that I am helping more and more every time. It's just that's why I want to help, right? And I think that to be better at doing that, I also need to recognize that having a constant support there is going to help me achieve that. Yes. And that's one of my goals. Yes. If that's what I want to do, if I want to keep on progressing and want to keep on evolving and I want to keep on learning, and it's very hard to do that just on. Yes. I think it's personally for me, it's very helpful, and I'm always open to suggestions. I'm certainly don't think that my way is the right way in any way whatsoever. So it's lovely to have that kind of somebody to bounce off of.
And well, let's talk a little bit. We'll talk about that in a moment, about that idea of knowing that supervision, part of supervision, it's not like coaching, is that suggestions do come in. It's worth thinking about that. If we go into the future now, like imagine, let's say supervision carries on, you have regular monthly or bi-monthly supervision, whether you have it with me or you have it peer supervision with a buddy or with another supervisor. What are the sort of things that you would envisage that you still feel like, yeah, I'm still curious about this, I'm still working on this in terms of your own practice?
So I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I think that in terms of my own practice, I I don't know if I'm now attracting people that have bigger emotional needs, but I feel like that is happening.
Yeah.
And or maybe I'm more open to it, or I read the the face and the space better as things have gone on. So the emotional side of things, I think, is something that I would envisage would play quite a large role
Yeah.
moving forwards, because I think that because I love that part, and I think that having being able to discuss some things around it, whether that's personal or like techniques or opinions, like, and I know you want to get back to this, but it isn't coaching this. This is a conversation. There are places where you can, like, I can ask you questions, you can put forward suggestions, like that is able to happen. So I do see that part being explored. And also it's love, I actually quite like the idea of having something like reciprocal, where I work with somebody as their supervisor and perhaps they do the same for me. That's quite a nice,
Yeah.
I don't know if that ever happens actually, but I imagine I would quite enjoy something like that. So you kind of feel on a par, but you're following each other's journeys. That would be really nice. Especially as I think that everybody does something ever so slightly different in their own coaching business.
Yes.
So we can, we are running businesses here, and it's useful to have somebody to not necessarily learn off, but just to see how other people do stuff. is a really useful part of it as well.
Yes.
Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. And to comment on that, peer supervision, there is a relatively tried and trusted approach. Is like one of the ways that coaches can work together is in peer supervision, and there's some good resourcing that I can share with you, because I think is supervision good from coaches from day one? My view is about a year after you're qualified. When you've when you're no longer needing that person to be your tutor or your trainer, or it's such a sort of intensive training period. After that, I think that the supervision is great, but I also really respect that lots of coaches will want to wait till they've got a few more quid coming in before that they do it. So actually peer supervision is a really good answer, and it might not be as advanced as with a qualified supervisor, but you can follow approaches, coaching style approaches, to be able to have a really good peer supervisory type of environment. And I think that there's some real value in it, definitely.
Yeah, real value in it. Yes, I wasn't thinking about it in those two ways. Yeah, so your peer-to-peer is like people who are the same kind of level as you, basically, rather than somebody who's a qualified supervisor.
Yeah, I think that's how it, and then you then become almost de facto, you become the next generation of supervisors, don't you? Because you've been doing supervision for a year or three, and then it's like, do you know what? Why don't I train to be a supervisor and get to that stage? That's what I've seen with quite a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as you just said, there's definitely, there could be benefits to both of those. And and of course, financially, sometimes that's the thing. But if you've got a busy coaching business, it's a bit like the way that I might talk to a potential client. Now, we're talking this is an investment in the self, to kind of help free you up to be better at what you do, which in turn, in theory, brings in further income. So if you are in a position that you're able to do it, that's it makes sense, because I think it will just help with the growth of your company anyway.
And plus, I have to say, it's wonderful being a supervisor. You get to work with people like you who are really open and reflective and care about their coaching and are up for carrying on improving their practice. And it's nothing but pure joy, really.
Yeah, I think if you're looking to, I recognize this is recording, whatever, but I think if you're looking to do supervision, then you're a pretty passionate coach. Like you're not doing this just for the sake of it, are you? Because if you're getting to, it wouldn't work for you. So you're already loving what you do and just want to, like, I imagine people kind of feel quite similarly to how I do. It just, I think it's almost like it's career progression. It's like the next step.
Yeah, it is. No, it's I mean, if there are hundreds of books about coaching, there's thousands of books about supervision. It's like that. It's like, I know it goes, whoa, what's all that? Where do they all come from? So, all right. So, I wanted to ask you a little bit that, I mean, it's like really clear that supervision will be part of your ongoing development. But what about sustaining yourself between supervision sessions, or if, let's say, you have a 6-month hiatus between supervisors, what things do you need to do to make sure you're sustaining both like the nourishing part of your practice, but also maybe the practical part of your practice?
Gosh, 6 months feels like a long time. Is that something,
No,
does that happen a lot that people would have like see a supervisor a couple of times a year?
no, I think no, I think the recommendation is monthly or bi-monthly, but sometimes things
Right.
happen, don't they? That you
Yeah.
have a gap or something
Yeah.
doesn't work
I
out.
mean, I'd like to say, I always think back to the reflection forms that we used in training, and I think they were great, but they also felt like a thing that you had to do that took a long time. And I like the idea of them, but I think in reality, I'm not sure that I would necessarily do that.
Yeah.
For me, though, at the moment, I already do something which I find very useful. I tend to I don't record sessions necessarily, but I might have like, I'll be writing notes at the same time or whatever it might be. And I tend to kind of write my thoughts down almost immediately because I forget.
Yeah.
Honestly, I'll forget. So that's, by tomorrow I would have forgotten today's, discussion. So I need to write things down. So that helps me. But one of the things that keep meaning to do when I write these notes, I write these notes about the client, the coachee, but today I had a slightly tricky conversation, and I suppose maybe it's that accountability of knowing that I was going to see you later, but tried to write down what it made me feel, because it's just a useful little reminder of what's come up for me. And if you're talking about nourishment, I always think we need to kind of make time or allow for whatever it is that we are feeling as well. We're humans, and it goes both ways. So I did that little exercise. It was only a few notes, honestly, literally, like not sentences, like a few little jotted downs, just to not only remind myself next time of what it brought up for me, but also just to be able to, I suppose, slightly decant and decompress a little bit after the session. That was actually a useful little thing. Although if not everyone's going to be like me, some people might actually do those reflective or create their own.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be what you've supplied or people have done in earlier trainings. I do think just a little bit of reflection, self-reflection, not just reflection on but self-reflection of what's come up for you or what you noticed, whether it's what you're feeling or how you wish you'd done something differently or what you were happy with. Can't remember what your things were, but it was something like, what went well and what could have gone even better.
Yeah.
I always kind of liked that. And so I suppose I just did that a little bit today. That I think is a helpful habit to create and to build on. And that was helping between sessions. It's also help in terms of, remind yourself if there is something you want to bring to a supervision session, it just helps, tap into the memory.
Well, and I'm really glad you said that, because that's helpful for us as well. Because if I was thinking about the reflective forms that we give, and it is more about analyzing the coach, and we don't ask that. There isn't a column that says, what did you notice about yourself, or what feelings did this bring up for you with this coachee? And maybe not for brand new coaches, because it might be a bit like, whoa, but actually it's a really good question to ask, isn't it? I think we might ask it in a training environment, talk about what you noticed about yourself, but actually I think starting writing about it or really actively thinking about it when you're on your own, because everyone will have a feeling, you'll click off, won't you? You'll finish a coaching session and you'll click off, and then you'll think about what you did, you'll write your notes, but you'll think about yourself and like, how do I feel and what was that like? And I think it's really good being able to articulate that.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to take long.
No.
Like it really doesn't have to take long. Like I'm a big fan of the habit stacking, so I tend to always make sure there's a bit of space after I work with somebody. It's not I'm not a back-to-back kind of I can't do that. I need that bit of time between. So it's literally like I finish the session, finish writing my notes, have a quick think of something like that. And I think that to go back to your original question of how you might work, if you have a large space in between your sessions, your supervision sessions, it's just it's useful. Self-awareness is very useful.
So I've heard. I've read that. So you mentioned earlier on a little bit about.
I'm going to turn the light on. It's getting a bit dark.
Yeah, of course.
Better, isn't it? Is that better?
That's fine. So you mentioned a bit earlier on about your about the idea you liked in supervision that it wasn't coaching, wasn't just a coaching approach, but actually there was some sharing and some
Yeah.
resourcing and some information. What did you like about that? What was useful about that?
I that's probably the thing that I like the most is that I like a lot of things going on, but I don't want it to feel like I'm under the spotlight.
Yes.
You know, that wasn't what I don't think that would have worked that well for me. And even though I know it's a supervision session for me, I just to be able to ask a question, to be able to be, you know, the fact that you share resources with me afterwards or whatever it might be, like that feels more like a, you know, it feels more like a conversation, you know, rather than coaching.
Yeah.
And that kind of feeds into what I was saying before about the relationship and being comfortable and having that kind of that ease, and probably feeds into the question about, you know, do you feel like you're yourself or you're holding back or whatever. You know, you're not going to hold back if it feels a bit more like a
Yeah.
conversation, if you're able to ask for you know, ask about tools and resources and you know, be able to ask about your experience or something, or even I think I can't, again, I'm not going to remember what
Yeah.
has been recorded before, but you know, if you've asked me something, I might sometimes ask something back
Yeah.
off of the back of that, and you know, that's a lovely way to work with
Yeah.
somebody and to kind of, you know, like enjoy the time.
Yes.
um it doesn't feel like coaching. It's not meant to feel like coaching anyway, but it's like it feels like a very helpful conversation that centers around the things that I brought to the table.
Yes. And that's a really good way to, yeah, it's centering around that. So sometimes it is a bit more coaching and you talking, but sometimes it is
Yeah.
a bit of sharing. And
Yeah.
do you reckon we got that balance right? Like, because I mean, what I try and do is like very happy to share an idea and experience, but also I think I was taught like, hey, we don't want to be supervisors say, well, you didn't ask that. I would have asked that. Why didn't you ask that instead? We're not trying to recreate and say, oh well, I could have done that better than
You
you.
still
It's
there?
more about the more general resourcing.
Oh, Charlie, are you still there? Were you still there?
Yeah, no, we had a little freeze. I
We
think
had a little freeze. I got as far as well, I didn't. I think you were just about to start asking the question, and then
okay.
I don't know
Well,
who froze.
what we'll do is we'll go silent for a moment and then I'll say it again and we can do a little trim.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
which, okay. I have to remember my question now. Yeah, I suppose I was thinking with that. I was thinking about the idea that we, as supervisors, we should be able to share things and resource and offer a view and offer opinion, but without making it like, oh, yeah, you did that, but you should have done that instead. You know, it's not
Mm.
it's not trying to sort of make you wrong and say, I would have done something better or different. It's about just having a different option. I mean, did that come over well enough for you?
Yeah, it came over great for me, and I think this is also going to depend on the individual who's in the supervisee, I suppose, because I'm very comfortable with having examples shared and having, you know, I quite like to hear stories, and I think that you did share some. I'd also be open to more, you
Yeah.
know, because I do think that like examples are actually really really useful. But I think almost it's, you know, again, when you start to learn how each other works, what works, and you work it out, don't you?
Yeah.
So I think that I'd be very happy for future supervisions if you were to share more of your
Yes.
experiences, because I enjoy learning from your experiences, and I think that it's almost like, you know, storytelling is quite useful, isn't it? So that's quite great. But I recognise also that some people may want a little less of that.
Yeah.
And you know, I think again that will develop one way or the other depending on each session that happens. But for me, the balance that we had
Yeah.
was absolutely fine. And if anything, I would have been very happy to hear more of your experience because I'm interested.
Thank you. And I mean, I take that for you. I definitely feel that I always will err on one story too few rather than one story too many. But I
Yeah.
agree, but because there's always every time that anyone ever speaks, I always think of a story. And if I shared even 10% of them, we'd be in trouble. So I shared 1% or whatever. But okay, it's a good point taken. I can always shove the odd one in.
Well, certainly in a supervision situation, I just think it's, the more which we hear from other people's
Yeah.
experiences is like it's another way of learning, isn't it? It's another way of I'll hear what happened with you or with your situation, and then I filter it through as to how it might relate to me or how I might do something differently. So I think that things like that are very useful.
Thank you. And I can talk about this actually when I train supervisors because there is something there about, I don't just think about what I do and what I would have done, but I hear so much coaching. I hear 10 sessions a week, so I hear 500 hours of coaching a year. So I hear, look, I can tell you, oh yeah, in this session the other day, there this coach did that, or I've heard a coach do that and it worked or it didn't work or whatever. So I think that the stories aren't all about what I've done and what I haven't done.
No, but and also there's other examples can be really comforting.
Yeah.
It feels like, as again, when you're a coach, you quite often might be, well, certainly for me, I do mostly one-to-one work.
Yeah.
So that can be quite lonely. So to know that there's other stories out there that are comparable or different or opposite, whatever they might be, it's like that's there's a comfort in that.
I know. And I wish I could share more widely some of that. You almost want to just put it out there, say, actually, you know, every third coaching session, someone cries, or often coaches don't come up with their own topic. Or, I mean, the amount of times I hear, for example, a coachee say, "Oh God, I'm waffling," and then the coach handles it really well because it's not waffling; it's just a thing. You're right. There is a real reassurance in that.
A reassurance. Well, the other one, which I was thinking of the other day, is that you've got to be reassured that you think you've asked a really good, deeper question, and they say, "I don't know."
Yeah, I don't know.
It's like, I don't know. That happens too.
It really does. Yeah, I've got the great question, the one that they write in the books as the powerful question. The one I asked that and they didn't answer it. They forgot it, or they said.
Yeah. Exactly.
But my favorite one on that was a coach friend of mine. She said she was coaching someone on their all about motivation, and they're talking about their motivation, and they live down on the south coast. And the coach said to the coach, she said, "So what's your drive like?" She said, "Well, I got the M27, right? And then when I get to Winchester."
Brilliant. That's
Absolutely true. Absolutely true. So, listen, thank you for this. I hope you found this useful. I mean, although this is not going to be the end to any supervision work we do, I think it's really good to have like an end point because you get the opportunity to really be reflective. So, I hope you've enjoyed it. But just tell me, what have you learned? Like talking about you as a supervisor, and we haven't had a topic, but it's been just like an end of supervision reflection. What's today's learning given you?
I think today has given me the moment to not only, it's almost like sometimes it's nice to have a full stop. Sometimes it's nice to take stock of what has gone before, how it's been helpful, and also think about what might be helpful as well in the future. I want to be able to tap into this resource again and make it as useful as possible. Okay. So that's mostly that's been a really helpful part of today.
Fab. Well, I'm really pleased. Well, listen, thank you so much. I mean, it's a joy, minute to minute, working with you anyway, both in the training we've done, but also now in all these supervision hours. So thank you, and thank you for this. It's incredibly useful, and I did take the compliment. So thank you for that as well. And enjoy the rest of your day and happy coaching.
Thank you. Thank you. Speak again soon. Bye.